Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Blackfish interview. We have three members with us today. We've got Edie Overturf and Paul Missal and Christopher Shotola-Hardt with us to talk more about their experience of Blackfish and tell us about their pieces in our show that 30 by 30 that's been a virtual member show going through the month of May. Our first virtual show. It's very exciting on our new website, blackfish.com. So go check it out if you haven't seen it already. And I'm going to start with Edie, who is one of our newest members. And I'd love for you to tell us how you got connected with Blackfish and what your experience has been like so far since becoming a member.
Sure. It's only been, I just counted, it's been 7 months. So it's not even been a year yet. And I got involved because Barbara Black used to work at Mount Hood Community College, and I currently work at Mount Hood Community College, and she comes out to all the shows at our gallery. So I met her through the gallery, and she saw my work, and she invited me to apply to the openings that came up, which was a rare time when there was 5 openings. Everybody help me out. Was that right?
I remember.
Yeah. So, and I was accepted. It was a kind of an intense process, but it was very welcoming too. It was 25 people asking me about my work in a short period of time. But it was really exciting to become a part of the gallery. I'd worked with a collective gallery in Minneapolis before, and it was a totally different structure. This one's a lot older and more probably organized in different ways, and I feel like everybody has more of an ownership to it than the one that I worked at before, which hadn't been run the same way with so much of a collective effort. And where was I? Oh, and then I just kind of jumped in and worked with some committees, got to know some people. I'm still having to ask people to remind me of their names sometimes. But everybody's been super welcoming, and I showed for the first time in February, which was a wonderful experience. I was so impressed by the exhibition or the installation committee, where I just turned around and then all the lights were done. It was such a smooth process. So I'm excited to be a part of the community.
Awesome. Thanks, Edie.
Mhm.
Well, and then going all the way to the other spectrum is Paul Missal, who's been with the gallery for over 40 years now. So, Paul, tell us how you got involved in the gallery and what your experience has been like.
I was approached by some of the other members who were meeting on a regular, nearly weekly basis, as Barbara had mentioned prior to this, and they were still forming and trying to find they've had a nucleus. And the nucleus actually was Jim Hibbard. He was the center of it all. We met at, the first, let's say, vision of the membership met over there was maybe 10 people or so, 8 or 10 people. And then they wanted to enlarge the group a little bit. And that's when I was approached by one of the members. I think it was maybe Christy Wyckoff, but I was approached by one of the members to join. And I was happy to do it because it was right at the time I'd been in Portland about 5-6 years, had no gallery affiliation, and actually wasn't doing that much work, and felt I really needed to have a push. It needed to have something behind me that gave me support and really encouraged and pushed me forward in my work. So that happened to be George Johansson. That wonderful guy came up to me one time and says, "Paul, you really need to get involved in the community here and do more artwork, and we want to see your work and see more of your work." And so that's how, and then right at the same time, it might even been Bill Moore, now that I think about it, asked me to join. But there was a very tight nucleus, and I was fortunate enough to get asked to join right when it was right at its tightest group, tightest point. It was really wonderful to come into something that was ongoing already. They had been meeting maybe, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 months. Then I joined, and we kept on meeting for perhaps another almost a year before we opened our doors. So with weekly meetings, we had the time to really get to know each other and to form a concept. You know, what did we want this gallery to look like? And so we really talked it to death in the grand, which has become a grand old tradition at Blackfish. We discuss everything, and then our bylaws, we formed those before we even opened our doors. And so I think that's been a real critical factor in the gallery's longevity. We've been able to go back to a system of order that we've all agreed on and have gone through over that year of meeting before opening our doors. So I still find that as one of the strong points of Blackfish. And every member that's come through has had to read through those and agree with them. There's no discussion. That is how we govern ourselves, is through our bylaws. And they are subject to change, which is one of the other wonderful things. And we do change them periodically or alter them or enhance them, but because it's an alive document. And I think that's an important thing too. So I really was that really agreed with me to be a part of something bigger. So it allowed me to kind of dip in, hear a stranger coming to Oregon in 1972 from Cleveland, Ohio, and having very little experience showing there. A little, I showed some in Cleveland, but wasn't part of a gallery as such. So I didn't have that experience, but I was teaching. When I was hired at the Museum Art School, as it was then called, it's now PNCA, or Pacific Northwest College of Art, it was a formative time for me. I was ready for this new degree of professionalism. So the gallery coming around a few years later, in 79, we opened. So around, 77, 78, we were talking about that gallery. By the way, it might be interesting for some people to know that there was a feeling in the effervescence around the community about Blackfish starting before it was Blackfish. I believe one of its first incarnations was Purple Daggers. And that was formed by, again, a small group of people who ran a guerrilla gallery that went around Portland and popped up with their shows in the very early days. We're talking, again, early to mid 70s. And by the mid 70s, Purple Daggers was, they would have a show every couple of months, and it would be by rumor, basically. And it would show up in the stairwell of some abandoned building someplace. And we, it was just, and students ran it. And then they were seniors, and there were a couple of people from PSU as well as from the Museum Art School, that, aforementioned PNCA now. So it started that way. And then as the members of those groups felt that, wait, we really need to organize this thing and make it a more committed venture and a more stable part of the art community. That's when we decided to, that's when they decided to bring a tighter group in, enlarge it a little bit with people from PSU, as I said before, and then elect the head. That was Jim Hibbert, who now occasionally still comes in from Mexico to visit the gallery. And he lives half-time in Mexico and half-time here in this place in Northwest Portland. So Jim is still around, thankfully, and we do get to see him. Well, anyhow, I'm digressing a little bit. So I just wanted to give you an idea that this is the roots of Blackfish actually go quite deep, and are in the community quite deep. And we're talking about in those formative days, some of the senior members being already senior members in the community, Jim being one of them, Jim Hibbert being one of them. As I said, we started then, and we started after Purple Daggers formed. A few of those members became our nucleus members at Blackfish, and then it built from there, so that after about a year, we had come to a number of about 16 people, and that's when I was included in that, and Connie was around in there too. So that's when we opened our first show in '79. That was awfully long-winded, wasn't it? I'm sorry. But I thought it was important to say that thing, how it first started with students that were seniors. And I think a lot of people don't know that, but it really, that I felt was important. And they still are, some of them are still here in the community, although not members of our gallery anymore.
That's amazing. And I think that's what's great about learning about all that history, which is wonderful. And I'm so glad we're getting to capture this. Is still the connection that Blackfish has when we do the recent grad show, typically in July, unfortunately not this year, but still having that touchstone to students, and even bringing new people in through the fishbowl too, that we have, giving students opportunities. Such a great way to continue that legacy of being connected with the community and students. It's awesome. Thanks for sharing all that, Paul. We'll have to do another interview where you just get to tell us all these cool stories. That'd be great. So Christopher, tell us about you and your experience with Blackfish and how long you've been a member.
I joined in 2004, and Paul and Harry Woodman, whose work is behind me up there, and Yana DiMartini were the three people that encouraged me to apply. And I like what Edie said in the beginning about it's a place where people take ownership, and it has been exactly that. And I tell people all the time that I cannot imagine a place for being an artist that feels like home, like Blackfish does. The kinds of programming we're able to do is unheard of in another gallery. As we got started, right before this interview, Kristen, you mentioned about the special programming that's happening this coming October. We have a group show, visual show, that's called The Love Politique, One World, Indivisible, happening in a month before a national election. So that is not a coincidence, that timing. It'll be comprised of Blackfish artists, as well as some artists from other galleries throughout the region who will be showing work and talking about that theme. Alongside that will be a month-long performance festival covering many genres of music. There'll be poetry reading, readers' theater productions, performance art, and the music will be thematic. There'll be a jazz night, a world music night, an indie night, a blues night, a song cycle about refugees. And just that kind of programming that's timely, that brings in lots of people from the community and connects, our discipline of art with people that express themselves in other disciplines. That cross-fertilization is wonderful, and I think is at the heart of Blackfish and makes it seem so special.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're really looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about our show that we've got going on now. And I'd love it if each of you would tell us a little bit more about your piece in the show, 30 by 30, and maybe the inspiration behind it.
Who do you want to go first?
You can go first.
Okay.
Just popcorn.
I have a piece that I actually forgot the title. I just looked it up. Okay, say it again. The piece is Pennant Flags. So pennant flags are usually seen in front of car dealerships or at sports events. They don't usually have text on them, but sometimes like birthday banners. So I've been using those and marquee signs and different ways of getting some sort of text into the piece where it's placed within the image. And the image actually says, "What fresh hell is this?" Because I feel like I say that to myself a lot these days. So there's a lot of my work in the last like year that's responding to political decisions and environmental impact, and my work now is impacted by the pandemic and thinking about equity issues. And yeah, so it's shifting like a lot of things. But that piece was in a series of 2-3 I did towards the end of 2019 that were kind of creating small scenarios where you could see this impact that people had had on a space, but there's no people in the space. Like recently I've been trying to do a lot of work without any human presence, but the suggestion of previous human presence. So there's some older like protest signs that are in the space too. So it looks like something significant happened, but you're not privy to it. And I've got it affordable. It's $200. I've been trying to keep my work, especially unframed, like really affordable because I do editions. And I just had a really awesome fundraiser that I did through Instagram and Facebook, where I sold prints for a minimum of $5 or $7. And the gallery agreed to waive the commission for that because I was raising money I'm from Illinois, so the state of Illinois COVID relief, and for Day Labor Network, which works with undocumented folks and trying to help them through COVID since they aren't getting assistance. So the gallery helped with that. So I was selling prints really cheap, and people typically were giving more than the required amount of money, which was great. I raised $1,000.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's great.
Yeah, that's exciting. So yeah, that's my little spiel about that.
Awesome. Paul, you want to tell us about your piece?
This is the piece, we're talking about the piece not in the gallery now, but the piece that's...
Yeah, your shell, the one that's in the virtual show.
Oh, okay. That's a little 6x6 inch piece that I did, a little painting that I did this while I was in Cleveland. I was being a caregiver for my mom, who was going through her transition. And so I was around the house all the time. I couldn't get back here, of course, so I stayed there. So I had someone and have some people that are living here that can take care of the place if I have to go. And at that time, I decided I would move back to Cleveland. So I stayed back there about 1.5 years or so. And it gave me a great opportunity to connect with my mom. I would make a trip back here for a week or so, or a week or two during the year. I came back here, one to deal with a commission that I happened to have been working on, and the other was to deal with the pieces in a show I was to have well, whatever date it was, I don't remember. But I decided I would have to do all the work back in Cleveland. So it had to be small because I would have had to ship it. So I did everything on heavy Strathmore, that paper, and then trimmed it to that small size, kept all the sizes the same of the paintings that I did, and framed them all identically. I would call here and linked up with, I think it was Framer's Inventory that actually did the matting and putting the piece together for me, so that all the pieces were the same size, the frames were the same size. So the frames were cut and made here, ready for me to mount them when it was time to get ready for the show. So I could have the mats cut, the frames all trimmed to size. So everything actually went together very smoothly. And I worked with things that were small because it gave me a chance to work in the let's say I didn't have a big studio. In fact, it was funny that I was working and staying and living in the bedroom, living upstairs in the bedroom that I spent most of my student years in, and at art school, and also was working downstairs on the kitchen table where I could be close to my mom in case she needed anything. So we had a fairly large kitchen, and the table, it was perfect for me to work on. I had a small easel, and I had a bigger easel for doing the large commission, but a small one for doing these small pieces. And I kept them small because I could do them fairly rapidly. I wouldn't be engaged in a large still life or painting that I would have to spend a great deal of time. I could do maybe a painting a week or something like that, in consort with the other duties I had around the house. So shopping, cleaning, and doing all the taking care of things there. So it worked out ideal, and to that end, I kept all the work to things that I like best, landscapes and still lifes, and that one piece, the shell, was something that I had sort of limited still life at the house anymore, but I found a shell at Goodwill. I found a candle upstairs in a drawer, and found the little items that I used in there and set up the still life. And I was very happy with my little still life. Actually doing the painting and working on the acrylic, it was very satisfying for me. And my mother was in the kitchen too, so she could watch me work. We could talk a bit and at the same time, I should say, that I was, what is it that before Zoom there was, and still Skype. So Skyping, I was Skyping my class here in Lake Oswego. So I had a class going in Lake Oswego where I had my laptop in the kitchen, and they could see what I was working on. I could assign projects, do my demonstrations, and they could watch me do the demonstrations. My mom could watch me do that. She just loved that. And it just, and then I could take the laptop and walk around the house and say, oh, this was my bedroom. You can't believe that. Here, look at the outside. And it was snowing and all the birds are around, or there were turkeys walking around, and showing that and showing my mother. And, it was just really fun. And think about here, 2,000 miles away, I'm in the living room of, or in this case, it was the large kitchen at our church, and I was Skyping with my class there and bringing them into my home. So it was really wonderful. I enjoyed doing it, and they could also get previews of the show I was to have there a little bit later. When I came back for the opening of that show, most of them had seen a lot of the work already through Skype. I would show them as I was working along. So anyhow, what was the question? But anyhow, that's
you were ahead of your time with all this Zoom.
Yeah, and I still maintain my connection with the class here at the church. We're going on to our 6th year of meeting. We meet 3 10-week sessions at the church, and anybody can join at any time. But it's usually a 10-week session. And they come in 1 or 2 weeks later, but usually right on time for the most part. And for some are the core group and been meeting for 6 years, going on to our 7th. We meet 3 hours every Saturday. So it's worked out really well. And I've enjoyed the Zoom. I still, it's like, for example, one of the charges you had. Am I jumping forward ahead if I talk about what I'm doing now?
Yeah, why don't you just get into it? That's fine.
Yeah, okay. All right, this is one of the projects. The students, I did that still life and would show it, close, and they would photograph it, and then I would also photograph it and send it to them. and then would do a copy of that after they did their still life. I had them, and we critiqued it. I would then, the next week, create another project. And in this case, it happened to be a project that was based on the last one. And so it's really been, well, anyway, I don't need to show it, but basically from this still life, they cropped in and did a mechanical still life based on that. You know, and I had them looking at people like Ben Nicholson, some of the people who used, I mean, these are people that I've worked with for a couple of years. But then I would do something like this. You can barely see it. I guess you really can't. But it's the same objects, but done in a very mechanical style. And so anyway, that's something that I haven't had the time to get involved in doing much of my own artwork. I really have been doing this as my own artwork. The last project they did after that still life was a color field thing, and then they're working on this kind of thing where they're doing a color field project with the warm, cool temperature and warm temperature, and then they're doing a still life that they invent out of an invented floral thing, or it could be an abstraction, where they experiment with warm temperature and cool temperature, happy and gay, sad and somber, except that I think I failed in this one. This looks as happy to me in cool colors as the one that's supposed to be happier. But you win some, you lose some. But anyway, they get an idea of, and I show them that, and I get that photographed and sent to them through their email, and so they have something to look at and guide them, and so they feel pretty secure about it. And so far, it's worked really well. So in a sense, the teaching has come back to become my art form. When I started teaching back in the early 70s, after grad school, I taught in parochial schools for a while. I taught at an interracial center called Caramoo House in Cleveland, Ohio. That was a fantastic place. And then finally at the Cooper School of Art in Cleveland. And so all of those teaching things sort of set me up so that I had a professional time in. I mean, I worked in a studio on usually still lifes or figurative work, but I didn't show very much. And it really took me getting here to Oregon, leaving Cleveland, leaving those ties, coming to Oregon and starting anew. And it's been so good for me to be here because by being part of the school, I was able to immerse myself in the art community instantly. I was, teaching with some of the best artists around, and I'm so proud of all the people I've been able to work with. It's been wonderful for me. I've been very blessed. And then to meet our students, I think your teachers. I'm on this panel with teachers. I mean, aren't the students the best? I mean, they are the greatest things. When you see them light up, God, that's what all of this is about. And so in becoming a good teacher is also becoming a good artist. That's also part of who you are. And so disseminating that information. And I think that's historically accurate. I think that's happened with many of the best artists, from Rembrandt to all the way, well, I wouldn't say all the artists, but I know that artists love to teach other artists. They love to share their work. They aren't that secretive, except maybe in the old trade days back in the Rembrandt's times. There might have been times like that, but usually we like to share our information. We love to do that. We love people to understand what we're saying, how we're saying it. So anyway, that's what kind of what I'm doing now is I'm continuing that. I still do commission work on occasion, but I've been trying to. I don't do everything that comes around. I try to just limit that, and because I have no time, I seem to have no time to do the other things I'd like to do, more still lifes. I'd like to do more of those, but I have a lot of things here that need doing too. I have a whole house that needs to be packed away from things that happened when I moved back from Cleveland. So I'm immersed with all of that, as well as well, I mean, that's really occupies a lot of my time, as well as a bunch of cats that I feed, and I've taken in some people here too, so that also has taken up a bit of time as well. So I've been pretty busy, but little by little, I'm kind of, ideas, they start trickling in and falling in, and I feel that things are going to change very soon. So I'm looking forward to that. That in itself, when people talk about it, being an artist and working in art is a very alive process. There's always something you've got to deal with because you're always thinking, working, doing, seeing. I'm so blessed to be an artist and be in a community that celebrates art and art making. I'm talking about Blackfish, but also in the community of our town. Portland's a wonderful town. It really is a blessed town. I will say Cleveland is wonderful too. I was very lucky to be there and to grow up in Cleveland by being part of that community too. So all in all, I'm a pretty happy camper because I see a bright future for all of us here. It's no doubt that we are at a point of history. We are part of history. We are the history makers right now, because what's happening now is the same kind of thing was happening in Portland, Oregon in the early 70s. We have the opportunity to change and direct where it's going. So we need to be proactive in all of that. I think this is a turning point, historically a turning point. And we need to know that. This isn't the time to rest and kick back. It's the time to be active in our careers, what we do, what we see, what we support. So anyway, gee.
That's awesome.
Mad about that.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's a great segue to Christopher, because what is really cool about this is because it was not intentional to put you all together. It's kind of just been random scheduling, and it's cool that it turned out that way, that we had a whole panel of teachers here, and we are so grateful for the work that you all are doing in the community. We're proud to have so many teachers at Blackfish. And I know Christopher is wrapping up his tenure. And so Christopher, why don't you tell us a little bit about the pieces in your show, and then a little bit about what you're up to now. And I think really what Paul was saying about, now is the time for change. It really speaks again to the Love Politique show that you are organizing. So you can maybe tell us a little bit more about that too, after you share about your piece.
I've got to make a quick stop, if you don't mind.
Okay, that's okay.
I've got to exit for a moment, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
I think that the work that Edie was describing that's in this 30 Works in 30 Days show is right up the alley of the Love Politique and all of the themes, Edie, that you talked about that are prevalent in your work about, inequalities and environmentalism. It's perfect. I also,
yeah.
I like what Paul was talking about, the richness of being an art educator and an artist, and really all of the thousands of young artists that we work with. And I benefit from my work with them so much. And I tell them always, this is a two-way street. I said, think of all the visual problems that I get to immerse myself in every single day. And every single one of those visual problems, there could be formal issues or spatial illusion problems, or just communication. How do we communicate? How do we create a piece that doesn't get stuck in awkward questions? How do we avoid those so that really what comes across is the message that we hope to have come across, although we can never control that. I like what one of my heroes, the late poet William Stafford, said. He said, the activity of a poem is in the mind of the reader. And that's the case with art as well. The work that I have in the show is a personal story. It's called Daybreak Routine. And people who've known me my whole life know that I love the environment and am particularly fond of birds. And I include birds in much of my work in the last 2 decades. At one of my shows at Blackfish, near the beginning, my father, and it was a show that focused on birds. He brought this file folder and handed it to me at the opening, and it was where I had gone with him to his office at the college, at the university, and I had been doodling and doing little drawings. I was just a little kid. And, I opened that up and looked at that, and I had drawn these birds. And I was impressed at what I was trying to communicate. Like, I had a bird in flight, and so I had some notions of how to show movement, and I was solving spatial problems of like having a neck of an ostrich coming toward the viewer. And it's like, I'm just a little kid doing that stuff. So it's always been part of, I do a lot of other art as well, but birds have definitely, they're just so interesting compositionally, all the textures, their beaks, their wings, they have directional flow, so that if they're turned this way, then it leads the eye in a certain way. I just love playing with all of that. But this daybreak routine, I have a couple of corvid families. Those are jays, ravens, crows, magpies. Those are all corvids, and there's a nesting pair of scrub jays that live near me, and every year they bring their new brood at my daily routine, daybreak routine. I call them. I have a special little call, and I don't throw the peanuts out there until I hear them. And sometimes, I can hear them really far away in the distance. They heard me and I call, and they talk back to me. And then then they come in. And then there are some crows too that are aware of that call. So there's a mated pair of crows that come around. They're in. So I'm a person who stutters, so that's going to happen here. There's it's interesting to note the differences of how the parents treat the youngsters as they are growing up. The fledglings of the scrub jays, the parents help them out, but only into maybe early to mid summer. Then the parents don't help them out. They try to toughen them up. They'll actually chase them away and fly after them. You don't see that with the crows. Crows, their young stay with them 2-3 years, and they will coddle each other. The parents will feed each other. They are not aggressive toward one another at all. It's very fascinating. I live very close to the school where I teach, so I can, occasionally, if I don't have a lot to carry, I can walk or ride my bike. And I have had both species. They know where I live, and they know where I work. A couple mornings, the crows, as I was on my bike, they followed me and actually kind of led the way, because they don't have to go on the street. They can cut across, as the crow flies. And they flew to the door of the school, and I rode my bike in the front door, and they landed along the roof, and they, you know, cawed at me as I went in. They have followed me home. They'll during when I'm teaching class, they'll come out on the tables outside my room, out in the windows, and they'll call to me, and I'll go out there and give them some peanuts. And a couple times the little fledgling scrub jays saw me when I was walking home, and I did the little call, and it would flit from tree to tree. I'd, you know, walk to the next block, and it would follow me all the way home. And then when I came in the front door, it went to the back door, and then I went out there and gave it the peanuts.
You're like
this
own little bird entourage. It's so cool.
Yeah, this
Snow White.
Bird whisperer.
the imagery of the crows. I have one crow that's in a lot of detail, and then I have a crow that, a scrub jay, and then there's a scrub jay that is a little bit not there. It's not as rendered as much, and then there's a third one that I actually sanded down, so there would just be a little, you can hardly see it. And so that's like the passage of time. I had set up my phone camera on the table and put peanuts there one morning and filmed for, I don't know, about 20 minutes. And so the scrub jays were coming up onto the table and then flying away. And so I used some of that imagery as models to paint the little painting.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. It's a great story. It's like leaning in, like, oh, this is so great. You guys have been wonderful. Edie, is there anything else you wanted to share about what you're working on? I know that you had already touched on it a little bit. Is there any other things you're cooking up or anything you want to show us?
I started in bookmaking. It's called a dummy, where you like make a 2-scale thing. So I'm gonna make a book, but books, and it would be all like lino cut printmaking, because I won't be able to. I don't know when I'll be able to use IPRC to use the letterpress. But it's gonna have like weird shaped pages. It's really hard to see in this, but books take so long to make that I don't know if it will be relevant anymore when I finish it. I think the pandemic will still be relevant for a while. But I don't know. I'm still kind of picking through it, and I'm kind of making the pages so that if it ends up not being a book, I can just have them as prints, because I have a show with Kelsey next March. So it'll become something if it's not a book. So I'm just kind of going with the flow at the moment and teaching two drawing classes, checking on my students, Zooming a lot. That's about it.
Yeah, you guys are Zoom pros now.
Zoom pros, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Paul was describing an early form of distance learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That you were doing with your class. You know, you'd fit right into this paradigm that Edie and I are working in right now.
And still doing right now. I feel really privileged that I've kind of got into this this next stage. To me, it's really exciting to be a part of it. And because that's why the point I was trying to make about this being a point of history, because we are actually reaching greater audiences, not less, because of our isolation. You know, it's put a nuance on the learning on the learning platform, where we can actually enlarge. It forces us to enlarge to a much greater degree. It's really a wonderful opportunity. We need to keep that in mind, that this is a pandemic, but it's also in other parts of it. It's an opportunity for us to find other ways of communicating with one another, other ways of regarding one another, other ways of respecting one another, and then still staying in charge and enjoying our community, because it's really building. You know, it's a greatly enlarged community now. This recording, you know, where it's going to go later as it's archived and used by other students to learn little bits of information of the paper that they're doing on this woman named Edie, you know, this fellow named Christopher, you know, Kristen, what she did to help build a gallery, you know, all those things that, you know, we're part of a piece of history right now. That's very exciting, and I'm really glad that I could be part of it.
Yeah,
It's really terrific.
I'm really excited about this project. I think it's been a great opportunity that we might have not thought about before. Having these more intimate conversations with our members, and it's been such a joy to get to know everybody better, and also a way to keep our community connected. And it's been great to see you guys too, because I haven't seen you in real life in a while.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm excited to share this with everybody else soon.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.